Okay. Hey, Emily. Okay. This is very important because Emily, my sister's here. Um, so I saw we saw last weekend we saw A Quiet Place, which was a fantastic. It was a fantastic entry into the horror genre. Everything you could ask for: compelling premise, great writing, undying tension. It was one of those. We were talking about it after the movie when we saw it, and we were saying that it was like a horror movie where there was never any let up. The one horror movie that I thought was the best of the past, 5 to 10 years was It Follows, which has that same sort of like atmospheric, just sort of tension and horror elements to it. And Quiet Place kind of had that same thing where it was like a high concept, premise that, is really more atmospheric and less about, the jump scares than that sort of like impending doom. And so, by all accounts, A Quiet Place is probably, one of the best horror movies of since 2000. But so there's one thing that, I think if you're going to poke a hole into the movie, and there's a huge logic gap, and you have to really, suspend your disbelief on, is, the whole premise is built on the fact that people can't, you can't make a sound without these, and I don't want to give too much away, I won't give too many spoilers, without these creatures, just like almost like instantly killing you. So they walk on bare feet. They don't even, like the sound of a shoe touching the pavement would be enough to allegedly bring these monsters, to life or wherever they're hiding out from. And they can't even whisper. So at one point, and I, again, won't give out any spoilers, but at one point, the mother, played by Emily Blunt, is like mouthing words to her son. So she, like, they're within like, face to face here, and they're just kind of like, she's barely even whispering it for fear of what would happen. So the okay, so that's where I'm getting at here is, so you're the entire movie A Quiet Place is, it builds up the notion that any sound is that's going to do you in. So this brings me to my point is, where do, and this is just a genuine question, and I'd like to know what anybody thinks, is where do farts play into this? Because I would have to assume even the quietest fart would be the end of you. These monsters or aliens would immediately descend upon you and rip you from limb to limb. Even with, a silent fart still has that, element to it. So if you can't even whisper, I would assume that would be enough to, to be, I don't know, to kill you, I guess. But, so you go, okay, all right, so but again, Silent But Deadlies, those are, you would, in this universe, in the Quiet Place universe, they are setting you up to believe that even a slight poof out of your butt would be enough to kill you. So you might say, all right, well, let's suspend your disbelief and say that a quiet fart would be doable, that you could sneak a quiet fart. Then you're stuck saying, well, okay, if I could do that, then what happens to, okay, so all right, so any movement causes noise. How is that addressed? It's the way that the sound editing of the film is designed, is that, like, they essentially make it so that, like, there isn't any noise. Like, they do a very good job in the sound mixing, and like you don't even, like, you can hear like a foot like touching the wooden floor, but the pains that the actors take to like avoid any noise is it's pretty interesting and pretty compelling, the way that it's a great study in just like sound design in filmmaking. And the leeway that they give you essentially is like the creak of a floorboard, like the slow creak of a floorboard is enough, is okay. And then, you know, the light breathing, but like a sneeze in this universe, you would assume would be enough to kill you. So, because again, you know, in the film, they mark paths for where they're walking, and they walk on sand. They create like sand paths to avoid like that noise element. So like, I'm definitely not saying that this is like a completely airtight logic in the film. But what it's hard to get past is, you know, just like normal body, you know, bodily functions. So like a sneeze, of course, would be enough to kill you. And that's an involuntary thing, which brings me to the idea of like involuntary farts. So even if you said like, I forget it, I'm not farting at all, you know, because I don't want to be killed viciously. You like John here is saying, you know, flushing the toilet and digging holes. There's never a toilet brought up in the film, though they do have a bathroom and she's in the bathtub at one point. So the logic might be, you know, maybe they're using the toilet, but the flush and the running water would be enough to end it. So my assumption would be that they'd be outside going to the bathroom. But again, as everybody knows, when you're taking a poop, there are, you know, the occasional errant farts that escape, and then through no fault of your own. You're not forcing it, and you're not trying to, you know, have a funny, you know, fart fest. But you know, you'd be dead from that. So you'd be in the woods and you'd be sitting in your hole, and you know, you're thinking like, inevitably I'm going to have to poop here, and I'm going to do it as quietly as I possibly can. And even if you were inching it out, which again, you know, poops you really don't have that much control over anyway. Funny fart fest is how I would describe A Quiet Place. I think if I had to pick one thing to describe the film, I think it'd probably be that. So you got involuntary farts while you're pooping. If you did manage to go into the toilet, think of the echo that would happen from a fart in the toilet bowl. That would be enough to end you. So, you know, am I disappointed in that logic leap? Yes. Am I disappointed that they don't even, you know, attempt to explain how farts fit into this universe? Absolutely. But Quiet Place is still pretty fantastic. If you're able to get past the idea that all of humanity would be lost instantly from farts, possibly even like, you know, the plop, you know, if you are pooping, the plop would be enough in this world. The wiping would be probably, I think, if you weren't careful. But yes, I'd say Sinbad and his windbreaker pants. Anybody in like a track jumpsuit probably would have been gone pretty quick. But I think, you know, you could take all the precautions in the world and put yourself in a, you know, a pretty safe environment, and you'd still, you know, be in trouble. I think there are, without giving too much away, you know, as you could probably guess, there are attempts at soundproofing. But I mean, you know, if you were maybe in a sound recording studio, here's really where you'd be set, is if you were like Dr. Dre in the studio and you were like, you were holed up and you were recording an album at the time that this all started going down, and you said, I'm going to hole up in the studio, and you just said, whenever I have to fart, oh yes, farting in your sleep. That's another one that I was thinking of is, yeah, I mean, what are you going to do? My wife tells me all the time about what I do in my sleep. So what are you going to, you can't, you can't outrun these things. So, I mean, you're just not going to sleep? Are you going to soundproof your ass? I mean, I guess you could go to those measures if you really wanted to. Because I would tell you, I wouldn't trust myself if I like tried to soundproof it myself with like newspaper and that kind of thing. Like I wouldn't trust my ability to soundproof anything. I don't trust my ability to change a light switch. So why would I trust my life, in this regard? And I certainly don't trust my ass when I'm sleeping. So you have to, like I was saying, you'd have to essentially have like a recording studio with like a, professionally built, soundproofed room. Really, you just need a panic room where you could go unleash these farts. Otherwise you would just have to say, well, it is what it is. Same with, you could go the same way with, peeing, any bodily movement. It's going to be trouble. So, I don't know. I think I'll leave it to the comments of, what people think. I think, it sounds like this is going to be, built for a series. So you're probably going to get a sequel to A Quiet Place. And I would assume that the crux of that story would be that they investigate this element of it. I think probably 2 or 3 movies down the road should probably be solely devoted to the idea of what happens when you fart in this universe. That's the thing too, is if you're holding in a fart, everyone knows how painful that can be. And then that just causes a whole other host of problems. And food poisoning when it's coming out of both ends. I mean, I think that's probably what it's getting at. I would have to assume that in this universe, they're pretty much saying that like most people in the world have been pretty much wiped out in the A Quiet Place world. So I would have to assume if of the 7 billion people on Earth, there might be 100,000, maybe 1 million. Let's say 1 million people are left on Earth. I would have to say of those, nearly 6 billion that were killed, like 5.5 billion were killed from just like a guy accidentally just letting one rip and then having his just ass ripped open by an alien, because they're all driven to the sound. So the first thing they're going to do is go right to the source and just really bury their fangs right into your butthole, which is a pretty rough way to go. So, yeah, I hope that they explore this more in the upcoming films. The dog is pretty concerned about it as well. But I do hope they bring this up in the upcoming films, and I will be sending John Krasinski quite a few letters about this. So we'll see what happens.